Thank you. Okay, I think we are live. Hey guys, what's going on? James here. Hope everybody is doing well today. Welcome back to yet another episode of the MrBucsNation podcast. I'm joined by Billy, William_Walsh_NFL here on YouTube. Go check him out. He's at the top of the description. Billy, how you doing today, man? Yeah, happy Wednesday to everybody. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Last time we were here, I was giving what some people would call controversial takes. I think that they are correct takes on the process of turkey and Thanksgiving and everything in between. So, it's whatever. But, what's funny is our Thanksgiving went exactly how I thought it was going to go. It was boring as can be. But hopefully everybody's doing good. We got Alam in here. We got King in here. We got Ryan in here. And today is going to be a fun topic today, Billy. Depending, It's a very divisive topic. It's back to topics of old, so to speak. I guess this is a topic that's always present for every team in a lot of situations, unless you're Patrick Mahomes or unless you're Patrick Mahomes. Like, there's really not much, but it's the topic of the quarterback today. Gonna be a fun topic today. Gonna really be breaking down Baker Mayfield again and talking about whether or not he has been good or bad for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Billy. So, are you ready to have a fun, non-diversive, non-dividing live stream today?
Make it, but I'm ready to try for it.
There we go. And I just figured out, okay, we saw in the chat there, Billy, you were muted for a moment, but you're okay now. You're okay
Oh,
now.
oh my gosh.
We're okay. Everything's okay. Well, now you decide not to say anything. So let's just dive. There's nothing to say. Well, anyway, don't you start. Well, so Billy, let's dive into this, right? And why are we having this topic? Why are we having this discussion today? It's because there's been a lot of people who've been split on Baker Mayfield. We have talked about it here on the channel a couple of times now. We did a whole other podcast episode talking about Baker Mayfield.
We did.
A lot of people been saying, Billy, that I defend Baker Mayfield a lot.
What?
That I am a member of the Baker Brigade, as we dubbed it here before we started recording.
You, James? No way.
And maybe they're right. I don't know. Listen, for me, personally, you don't got to agree with me. But from what I've seen from Baker Mayfield this year, it's been overall decent quarterback play. Good quarterback play, I will even say, Billy. And we're going to dive into it, talk about some of the different types of things, comparing even a lot of different types of situations and whatnot this year, because there's been a lot. One thing I want to talk about real quick is I want to get your thoughts on the quote that had came out recently, because I'd made a video talking about it, but we have yet to get your thoughts and opinions on it, of the quote that Baker had talked about after the Colts game, where he had said, guys need to be upset enough to win, and I'm gonna do my job and bring along as many guys as I can with me. What were your thoughts on that quote whenever you heard it? Because that's been something that's also been kind of splitting people up a little bit in terms of is he pointing fingers? Is he holding people accountable? I already made my video talking about it where I said I view this as accountability, but I mean, I'm kind of part of the Baker Brigade at this point. What are your thoughts and opinions?
So when I heard this quote for the first time, I didn't really take any major stance on it. I realize now
Why
a couple,
not?
yeah, I
How
realize now
dare you not take a major stance on this?
it's become
This is war, Billy.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a big deal when he said it. Honestly, when I heard it, my initial thought was Baker's getting a little bit peeved. I think he's annoyed at some of his teammates. But I didn't really it wasn't any, there was no specificity there. It wasn't specific to a player. It wasn't specific to a side of the ball or even a situation. It just felt like on a whole, losing as many games as the Bucs have lost, right? They've only won one game since the bye week. That wears on you. And I think that you see it in that moment. He's just like, man, like it's annoying, especially when you see people listen, if we see it, Baker sees it. You see people kind of lackadaisical, loafing. The effort is not there. So if you are someone who's giving effort, and I think we could all agree, whether you don't like Baker Mayfield, or you think he's underachieved, overachieved, wherever you want to put it, he's certainly given you effort this year. He's played through some nicks and bruises. He's ran hard when he's scrambled. He's shown frustration and been upset when the team is struggling, and he's been thoroughly animated when the team is succeeding. So Baker Mayfield's giving you effort. And if you are in a group of people, you're a part of a team, and you're one of the guys who's giving effort, when you see the other players around you or the other people in your team around you not giving effort, that's bound to frustrate you. So that's how I took it. I didn't read it as anything massive, and I'm surprised that it blew up, as much as it has. But yeah, I just thought, all right, yeah, Baker's annoyed, and you know what? Me too. So I can't fault the man.
How dare you not take a hardline stance on this? Look, Ryan Swain says it best. Billy, don't you know when something blows up, you have to take an immediate hardline stance? Come on. What are you doing? Listen, for me, I honestly, like, I read the quote and I was like, or I listened to the quote and I thought, like, why is this a big deal? At first, but I think what people are pointing, you look back at the time with Baker and the Browns, and people were possibly waiting for something to kind of like view as a similar thing, right? Because they heard Odell Beckham complaining about Baker Mayfield. They saw that a lot of people thought that he was a bad teammate for the Cleveland Browns, and then they were waiting for something to say, see, bad teammate, look at him right there. And this is their smoking gun type of moment, right?
So we could, I guess, I don't know, if that's something you plan on diving into, but the whole Odell and Cleveland thing, and as far as Baker being a bad teammate, I mean, that's one player that he has played with on, over countless rosters. And Odell has had his fair share of issues all over the place too. But Baker Mayfield has never been referred to as a bad teammate. Really, like before Odell's dad put out that video of, Baker missing Odell on Instagram, like on a loop. There was never talk of Baker being a bad teammate. I think maybe when he first got drafted, he was a little bit more immature than he is now, for sure. But there was never like commentary that, man, we can't stand this guy. That's not something that's really followed him, or a narrative that's bubbled up around him that much. And by all accounts, everybody on the Buccaneers loves Baker Mayfield as a guy. So yeah, I guess I get what you're saying. People are kind of waiting for like, hey, here's our opportunity to needle in there at that narrative. But I think that narrative is kind of washed, honestly.
I mean, what has Odell done since he left Cleveland? I mean,
Well, he won a Super Bowl, but
yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
but
whatever.
otherwise,
Whatever. No, look. But no, to your point, um, it goes back to the idea of like, it's that's one player. If it was multiple players coming out and saying that, then that would
yeah.
tell you something. But
I believe Chubb on the Browns actually came out after the whole, like maybe it was during or right after the Deshaun Watson, all of that, when Baker was like in his weird phase in between teams, that he stood up for Baker Mayfield and said he was a good guy. So, Chubb is obviously highly respected. Anybody who follows the Browns even slightly, he's a man of very few words. So when he speaks, you listen. And I just don't think that narrative has a lot of weight, doesn't carry a lot of weight to it.
yeah, and to Alam's point, he said, or sorry, Luke's point. Luke Stone says Baker has been better than Geno this year. That's actually something I kind of want to dive into, because a lot of people have been saying Baker hasn't been doing enough to win games. And I want to talk about that today and kind of go over Baker's stats so far this year, right? Because right now, as it stands, he's 17 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, Billy. His passing yards, and well, first off, in passing attempts, he's 8th in the NFL. Okay. The guys who are above him, you look at guys like C.J. Stroud, Joshua Dobbs, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, Josh Allen, and Sam Howell. Out of all those guys who are above Baker Mayfield in passing attempts, the only guys who that only half of them have a better record than Baker right now. Sam Howell is at 4-8. Justin Herbert's at 4-7. Joshua Dobbs is at 2-9 as a starter this year, and CJ Stroud, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen all have a better record than Baker so far this year. Okay, but to dive into it more, you take a look at touchdowns. Baker's 14th with 17. Guys who are better than him are Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Tua T, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, C.J. Stroud. Jordan Love somehow has more touchdowns. Brock Purdy, Sam Howell, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, and Kirk Cousins, who had only played in 8 games. That's because Kirk Cousins is freaking crazy, apparently. Guys who have less throwing touchdowns than Baker Mayfield this year. Joe Burrow playing in 1 less game. Matthew Stafford, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Derek Carr. It's just like whenever you look at, that's the first thing that jumps off to me is you see 7 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Baker is 15th in interceptions this year. Guys who have thrown more interceptions this year: Goff, Geno, Stafford, Mahomes, Hurts, Tua T, Howell, Allen. These are all guys that are considered franchise guys for their respective franchises. And when you're looking at the stats,
with the exception of Howell.
Well, depending on what, a lot of people thought that at the beginning of the year, whenever Howell was going kind of crazy this year, that
to Sam Howell was a franchise quarterback.
Well, a lot of people thought that Sam Howell might be that dude. JC Allen's in here. What's up, JC Allen? But that's the first thing that comes off to me is has Baker been good? Has Baker been bad for the Bucs so far this year? If you're looking statistically, hasn't been bad, Billy. Has not been bad. And I know stats aren't everything, but what are your thoughts on Mayfield's stats so far this year?
I think they're a little bit askew, a little bit misleading, because there are lots of drop passes that Baker Mayfield has had to deal with this season. The Buccaneers receiving core and tight ends have not been what I think a lot of people thought they might be, right? Russell Gage getting hurt early. Of course, that was a setback that they had to deal with. But Mike Evans, your all-pro receiver, future Ring of Honor member, going to have his name up in the stadium. Early in the season, lately he's been able to right the ship. But earlier in the season, a lot of drops out of Mike Evans this year, uncharacteristically. Cade Otton drops a touchdown against the San Francisco 49ers. That was a laser from Baker Mayfield. There's just a series of, even Chris Godwin last game, who was one of the more sure-handed receivers in recent memory in the entire league. Chris Godwin with drops last week. Just uncharacteristic. The team has underachieved as a whole, so I think that kind of eats away a little bit at Baker Mayfield's statistics. But yeah, as far as just on paper, looking at how he's performed, I think it's kind of what you would expect if you came in with an unbiased view of Baker Mayfield heading into the season. He's got, like you said, 14th in touchdowns. I think you said 14th in touchdowns, 15th in picks. Well, there's 32 teams in the league. So 16 is average, which would put him at slightly above.
Yeah, and you kind of talked about drops. I want to go over it real quick just to see what's going on with the team in terms of drops, okay? So you go down to the advanced statistics this year. You take a look at drops. Mike Evans has had 7 this year. Trey Palmer's had 3. Chris Godwin's had 2. Cade Otton's had 2. Payne Durham's had 2. Keyshawn Vaughn had 1. I mean, that's 10, 14, 16, 17 drops for Baker Mayfield this year.
There's dropped touchdowns on there. Don't forget when Mike Evans had a wide open touchdown that he dropped 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah, like Mike Evans is 8th in dropped passes this year and look, I love Mike Evans, by the way. I'm not to knock Mike Evans. He's still been absolutely fantastic this year. But 17 drops this year on the team. It's not fun. It's not good.
It's
Um,
not.
it's a very that's a notable stat, right?
Yes.
Um, I think Mayfield's stats have been pretty telling. Somebody said Masenko said Baker is a cooler Ryan Tannehill. I disagree with that. Um,
Cool. A cooler Ryan Tannehill?
yes, I mean
I like that.
for all we know, Ryan Tannehill could be pretty cool.
I
But
think I think there's merit to that point.
well, I want to go back. Let's kind of compare it then, because obviously Ryan Tannehill got benched this year, and that's not good for him. But
I think
let
to be fair, you got to look at prime Tannehill. You got to go back a couple years to when they were like wheeling and dealing, and look
well
at those.
let's just take a look then at. I want to take a look at 11 games for Tannehill last year. Okay, the 11 games Ryan Tannehill, his first 11 games last year, he had 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, sacked 29 times, 2,371 passing yards. Baker has 4 more touchdowns. He has 500 more yards, I think. Billy, what's Baker's yardage total again?
25-88. So 2026.
Okay, so he has a couple hundred more passing yards. Tannehill's was sacked 29 times. I think Baker's at 26, something along those lines. But to me, it's just you're seeing more out of Baker. Just even if it's slightly more, you're still seeing more. Um, and I think also one thing that's important. We had talked about this earlier, Billy,
Hmm.
about um last year. A lot of people we talked about Tom Brady a lot. Even if you go into Tom Brady's stats last year, because that's a guy that a lot of people, obviously Bucs fans, love. Brady's first 11 games last year, Billy, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 3,051 passing yards. So, and only one more win than what the Bucs have right now, which is important as well. Um, so for
I
me,
think with Tom last year, the big difference is he was very risk adverse. So, of course,
was Tom a
yes,
cool Ryan Tannehill last year?
Tom Brady's going to have less interceptions and yeah, I mean, he's Tom Brady and he was in ultra conservative mode the way he was playing last year, even more so than normal. Um, I think I think that's a great point. I'm not knocking that at all. Ryan Tannehill, though, people forget, Ryan Tannehill now, he's been banged up and he lost his job. He's older. Ryan Tannehill, when the Titans were cruising and they had Derrick Henry, which is much, I think, and they had AJ Brown and Derrick Henry, which is very similar to, I think, the way on paper the Bucs would like to play. I think they would like their offense to be like that. Mike Evans stretching the field, Chris Godwin kind of working over the middle, and then you've got it's not Derrick Henry, but you've got Rashad White as kind of a workhorse back. I think they'd like to be somewhat like that Tennessee Titans style, and then you're playing good defense. Ryan Tannehill he has a 22 touchdown, 6 interception season and a 33 touchdown, 7 interception season with almost 4,000 yards on his resume. So to say he's a cool Ryan Tannehill, it feels like it's almost like a backhanded compliment, but Ryan Tannehill got paid by the Tennessee Titans.
I think he's a
He
better Ryan Tannehill,
he was
or I, mean, I
he
think
was
he's better than Ryan Tannehill.
but
Sorry.
even still, to say he's even if he were completely equal, that's not an insulting comment to throw out there. Ryan Tannehill had his team deep in the playoffs.
They made the
So, and
AFC Championship game.
granted, it was steered by a workhorse running back, but still, nevertheless, he did get his team to the deep into the playoffs and have a playoff run, has one under his belt. So I think I don't hate that. I don't hate that comp. I think that the Bucs would love it if they could run their team much like the Titans of yesteryear, of a couple seasons ago with Mike Vrabel when they were really rolling. I think that's how Todd Bowles wants to scheme it up, and I don't think that Baker Mayfield playing like Ryan Tannehill during that era of Titans football is a bad thing.
The reason I take a look at all these comparisons, right, is because it's important for contextually, even contextually speaking, Baker's not playing bad in my opinion. He's just not. Like I'm not seeing that. If a guy, even again, like what you said, a backhanded compliment to compare him to Ryan Tannehill or whatever. I think he's better than Ryan Tannehill, and even then, Ryan Tannehill made it to the AFC Championship game in the playoffs multiple years in a row. even taking a look back at Tom Brady last year, a lot of people who say, well, Baker Mayfield's not Tom Brady, so it is what it is. Like, he stinks, right? Brady only had one more win this time last year, had less touchdowns, yes, had way less interceptions, but was also throwing the ball 470 times, almost 100 times more than Baker Mayfield at this point, Billy. How many attempts does Baker have?
I apologize for not having this stat. I wish I did. I didn't know we were going to swing it quite this much this way, but I'm thinking Baker Mayfield's yards per attempt this year are higher than Tom Brady's yards per attempt because every third down and more than three, Tom Brady threw a screen to Chris Godwin.
Baker's at 6.8 yards per attempt.
Okay,
Tom Brady this time last year 6.49.
Just barely won. Okay.
Just barely. So if we're talking about all he does is check down, he doesn't throw the ball deep. We have proof from last year as well to say that. And also Brady threw the ball 470 more 470 more times. He threw the ball 470 times in the first 11 games. Baker is at 380 right now. So, my point is just you got to look at it in the right context, man. Is Baker Mayfield Tom Brady? No. Has he been doing good for the Bucs? In my opinion, yes, guys. And I don't even look. I mean, I know. Look, people are gonna say, James, you're on the Baker brigade. I know. Baker is this year equivalent to Jordan Love. I don't think so personally. Like, again, you can compare him to.
But again, is that a bad thing? I think that's where the disagreement is.
Well, I mean, Jordan Love's viewed as the guy for the Packers.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Is that a bad thing? You know, it's the same thing with the Tannehill debate. If you have Ryan Tannehill, you know, prime Tannehill, is that a bad thing? Are you upset?
Right now, Jordan Love's 5-6, 19 touchdowns, 10 picks, 2,599 passing yards. One guy that a lot of people, I think we did this comparison last stream, Billy, was Geno Smith.
Yeah.
I want to take a look at Geno Smith's 2022 logs real quick through the first 11. Huh?
You take a shot at Geno?
No, I like Geno. I like Geno a lot.
Feels like a shot's coming, James.
No, not even. That's not even the case. But you take a look at Geno's stats last year, if it doesn't even want to load for me, Billy. But even if you take a look at Geno's stats last year, it's still very comparable in my opinion. 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 2,802 passing yards on 353 attempts. So Baker's thrown 30 more attempts, 27 more attempts. He has 4 less touchdowns, the same amount, or 2 more interceptions, and I believe just a very small amount more of passing yards. Geno Smith got paid by the Seahawks, and he's been deemed their guy. So it's interesting, man. And like, again, look, if you're comparing a guy to Tom Brady, you're gonna be disappointed every year. You're gonna be.
Yeah. Because there's quite literally only one.
Yeah, there's only one Tom Brady. There's only one Patrick Mahomes. It's just it's a situation where I think it's unfair. Even to go back to Jameis's first 11 games, 22 touchdowns, 20 interceptions, 3,391 passing yards. I mean, again, it goes back to my theory that if Baker was having this year after, gosh, I mean, a lot, not even just Jameis, but after a lot of guys. If Baker was the guy after Freeman, if Baker was the guy after Mike Glennon and Josh McCown, those guys.
Any year before 2020.
Yeah, before the Brady year.
Yeah.
Would that be the same? like would that be the same reaction, the same split reaction?
He would be one of the best quarterbacks the Bucs have ever had.
That's where it's just like, what are we talking about?
We've kind of talked about this a little bit. If he keeps this pace, if let's just say, for argument's sake, hypothetically, the Bucs re-sign Baker Mayfield and he just plays the next 4 years or so in Tampa Bay at this exact pace he's on now, he's going to go down as one of the best quarterbacks the Bucs have ever had. And it's not really going to be that debatable because if you take Tom Brady out of the equation, yes, the Bucs have had some names in Doug Williams and Steve Young who have gone on to do things elsewhere, but in reality, then you're comping Baker Mayfield to guys like Jameis Winston and Josh Freeman in terms of people who played the longevity or the longest part of their career in Tampa. And what did they do? And it's going to be a lot less than what Baker Mayfield is doing right now, should he continue at this pace.
Josh brings up an interesting point. Do I consider Baker as the leader of this team? I consider him a leader of this team. My take here is that this team has very weak leadership. Hard for the locker room to follow Baker when he can't lead the team to victory, and Bowles has no passion on that field, no emotion. That's the thing. For me, the Atlanta Falcons game, did Baker throw a late game pick? Yeah, he did. Did he get the team back into a situation to tie up the ball game? Yes, he did. Did he have a game, what should have been a game-winning drive versus the Houston Texans? Yes, he did. Those are all factual, objectively just true statements here, Billy.
Especially the game. That one hurts because he did literally take the team down the field, throw the touchdown.
And even right now, like obviously comparing leadership, well, he's not a good leader like Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. Those guys have the pedigree now to where
Yeah, I think it's hard to come in and lead when you've never been on a team or with a group of guys before. Generally, you have to feel it out. I know, again, Tom Brady came in and led from day one. Okay, but that's a little different. He was, 10, 15 years older than some of his teammates and came in with instant credibility of, okay, this man's a Hall of Famer. Let's just listen to what he says. He came in almost like an older brother or a father. Baker Mayfield is coming in as a guy who wasn't even deemed the starter from jump and then had to battle to get that opportunity. So it's a little bit more, the dynamic is different for to lead from that spot. But I do think Baker is a leader on the team. The leader is tough, but Baker Mayfield hangs out with his offensive lineman, takes them places. I think that unfortunately the way the Buccaneers are divvied up right now, I think Baker Mayfield is the leader of the offense, and I think Devin White is the leader of the defense. Unfortunately, I think because Devin White has longevity, he kind of overarcs as a part-time leader of the team, but his leadership has been lackluster this season, and his play has been lackluster, and that kind of dwindles away at leadership from a lot of other avenues, in
I
my mind.
I agree. And talking about accountability, talking about leadership, and Robert Jackson makes a comment here saying trying to replace guys is a mistake. Our problem is guys making plays. I do understand that completely. I think the guys haven't been making enough plays. Todd Bowles has been talking about that, and that's something I agree with from Todd Bowles, is that there hasn't been enough concentration. There hasn't been enough good plays. One
But
guy,
that's just coaching.
yeah, and but one guy I feel like who has been going out there, and you see a guy go out there and obviously he makes some bad plays, but if you need some crazy scramble on third down to get a first down to keep a drive alive, like Baker's putting it all on the line.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of people would deny that or argue that.
Yeah.
He is trying his darndest out there, right? Isn't
Yeah, he doesn't cheat you on effort, which is not something that I guess it's not something you feel compelled to praise, but when you look around the rest of the team and you have so many guys cheating you on effort, it is something you have to praise because when it's easy to give effort when everything's going good and you're like front running and you're out in front, when things get tough and it's dark and gloomy, a lot of guys just curl up in a ball. And a lot of Tampa Bay Buccaneers players this season have done exactly that. They're not giving you effort. Baker Mayfield, week to week, he gives you effort, if nothing else. So yeah, again, does that make him a franchise quarterback? Of course not. But does that add into some of that leadership? And even dating back to the beginning of this, when we talked about that quote, where Baker Mayfield's agitation is coming from, I think it's because Baker Mayfield is giving you that effort. He's playing banged up, and he's annoyed that other people are not meeting him there. They're not meeting him halfway. They're lackadaisical versus him, who's all out all the time. And I think that kind of that's where that frustration from that quote that we discussed earlier, I think that's really the manifestation of it.
Yeah, ultimately I think it's this. You look at the situation right now, you're only one game less of a win than what the Bucs were at with Tom Brady last year. Um I think that some people have been possibly spoiled by not even just going back to the Brady era, Billy, but even eras before where the Bucs were getting 4,000 something passing yards per season with 30. Even James had a couple of years like that, right? Where with the
Yeah,
Dirk Cutter
lots of
years, where
yards, lots of touchdowns, lots of picks.
yeah, and people remember all the high numbers of touchdowns in all the 4,500, almost 5,000 passing yard seasons, and that's the expectation, and that's not fair, in my opinion.
Well, it's not fair because there are multiple ways to win. And that is one way to win, but it actually didn't even win. Okay. Because
Well, it
yes,
did.
all that.
It did in the Brady era. It did in the Brady era.
No, no,
Era.
no. I was just focusing on the Jameis Winston era. I apologize. I was just focusing on the latter part or latter portion of your statement where they remember with Jameis Winston, 4,000 yards, 29 to 30 something touchdowns, and then, high teens to, a crazy year with 30 interceptions. Like that's great, but that doesn't necessarily always translate to winning. Yards don't get you victories. So there are multiple ways to win. And yeah, right now, the Buccaneers, and I'm going to stick with this, I think it's a great point. The Buccaneers are trying to win more like the Ryan Tannehill led Titans of a few years back versus airing it out all over the place. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that because the NFL is full of full of different styles of teams, different archetypes of teams, and the Buccaneers are just in a different archetype than the archetype you're talking about there with airing it out and slinging the ball all over the place.
Yeah, I mean it was a transition, right? Like you went from being a team that did not want to run the ball at all to a team that now, with only 1 year of ro- building a roster towards a new balanced approach, to say let's just dive into this full send, right?
Yeah.
When your
And
guys that you may have might not be, I'm not even talking about Baker, but the guys that you have on your roster, all of them might not even be geared towards that type of scheme.
it was, well, of course, the roster was built to be a passing team, right? It was built for that. But you're also without Ryan Jensen, which is an injury that no one really talks about often.
So
But how
huge.
much better, how much better would the run game look if you had Robert Hainsey on the bench or at guard and you had Ryan Jensen in there mauling people in the middle? That is a huge loss for the Buccaneers. It was a huge loss last season for the Buccaneers, and it's still a huge loss looming into this season. It's hard because Ryan Jensen is a leader, and it's also hard because Ryan Jensen is a mean mugging baller in the middle of your offensive line that I think the Buccaneers just have not adequately replaced really since he went down.
Yeah. So ultimately, Billy, do you feel like Baker's been good or bad for the Bucs this year? I mean, I'm part of the Baker brigade, so I'm gonna
You're in the brigade, yes.
so
That's
I'm
you know how around the stadium on like the banner under the fans, like in the stands they have all those things like, oh, Evans's end zone Pirates and Golston's Warriors or whatever. That's what it's got to be. It's got to be Baker's Brigade.
that's what it
That's what
should
it should
be.
say on the thing. That's what it's absolutely what it should say. I wonder if it already does because I feel like every player has one like around the stadium. So I wonder what Baker's is. I wanted to ask you a quick question before we get. You ready? Would you take because people are talking about Baker Mayfield? I feel like a big really the kind of the parting where everybody parts is not that he's good or bad. It's just like where he is like in terms of his ceiling, right? So I think somebody with a higher ceiling that I'd be curious to ask if you would want on this team because I think he will be available. What if the Buccaneers decide to let Baker Mayfield go and they make a run this offseason at Kyler Murray because the Cardinals are done with him and they're going to move forward and try to draft a quarterback, move on to someone new. What is your take on Kyler Murray versus Baker Mayfield?
I think that Kyler Murray is a more talented player
Of course.
than Baker Mayfield. I don't.
Much higher ceiling, right? We could agree.
Yes, I don't think he's as good of a teammate, and
And
that's
now,
it.
so what would you rather who would you rather have though? Because one is high ceiling, and if you got him with a good coach, you would be like, man, this guy could be right.
I would much rather have a guy that is a combination that is good, a good player, and a good teammate than a guy who is a great player and a bad teammate. If that makes sense.
And I agree.
I would take less natural talent if it means
Yes.
that the guy's a stronger leader. Because at the end of
In,
the day, it's still a team sport.
intangibles over tangibles. I agree. But I was just curious because a lot of people, like Ryan Tannehill, right? I bet you he's probably a really nice, great guy, good in the locker room. But his ceiling is nowhere near as high as other quarterbacks' ceilings, So Geno Smith, I'm sure he's a swell fella. But again, talking about ceiling of quarterbacks, a guy like Kyler Murray, he can make plays that very, very few people have ever been able to make. But is he the guy you want to bring in? Talking about a team devoid of leadership, you know, I was just curious because I think that could be something. It was floated around last year, if you remember, after Mike Evans caught the touchdown from him in the Pro Bowl. That was like a thing for a minute, and I was just curious how you would what your take would have been on that.
Yeah, I mean, just for me, I would value a strong teammate or a good teammate who has less high of a ceiling that could still get the job done
Yeah.
versus a guy who um whatever the
He's just highly capable.
yeah, which by the way, folks, I mean, we have talked about Ryan Tannehill, I mean, as an example, right? A lot of people didn't like Ryan Tannehill, but he ended up being the quarterback of the Titans for until they were forced to go in a different way. I mean, he was the quarterback of the Titans for, if I can get a look here,
I got you. He was the quarterback
past
of the
five
Titans.
five 5 years basically.
And by the way, he was in Miami for 6. He's had quite a long career, Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, and you know, it's if he's a comparable guy, he got paid. People don't like Kyler Murray, he got paid. People don't like Jordan Love, he's viewed as the guy. People don't like Jared Goff, he's viewed as the guy in Detroit. So
Yeah.
like guys, let's just think about this contextually whenever we do think about that question of has Baker been good, has Baker been bad? Just look it up, do your research. Let's think about these things comparatively, not just for the Bucs. Like let's compare it to it's important to remember context of history between what the Bucs have had in the past and also what's going on around the league.
Yes.
Uh,
Just and for everyone, because it's a big comment. We discussed this last time we talked about Baker. Neither one of us was necessarily opposed to drafting a quarterback because we're not, well, now I don't know. Now you're in the brigade. So maybe you are
Well, I'm
now.
still not. Like that's the thing. I'm still not. Like if you do want to pull and look, I mean, look, draft a quarterback. We talked about this. They did draft a quarterback. They drafted Kyle Trask
Right.
in the second round. He's a second
I,
round pick.
I want to be so clear. I'm not opposed to the Buccaneers. I'm not naive to what Baker is, and I understand that there is more than him. More than him is something that's capable of achieving. He's certainly not the peak of the mountain. Um, and I'm not opposed to the Buccaneers letting Baker walk, and you want to draft a quarterback, you believe in the guy, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for all the people who think that that's the only answer, understand how easy it is to become the New York Jets. The New York Jets have been drafting quarterbacks and searching for a guy since I've been alive. It is very easy to fall into that gaping chasm of just rotating through rebuild after rebuild after rebuild. We draft a quarterback, we hire a coach, we fire the coach after 2 years, we get rid of the quarterback after 4, and then we start over. That is hard to get out of once you're in it. Baker Mayfield may not be the top of the mountain, but he is not the ravine beneath the, either. So you gotta sometimes you have to pick your battles and just remember where you could be versus where you are.
Yeah, I feel like it's very important. Yeah, so it's interesting, man. We'll probably dive into this more as the season goes on, just because
I hope so.
you know it's what we do. It's what we do here on the channel. But Billy, before we go ahead and head off, do you have any final words?
Do I have any final words? I feel like I want to give Baker Mayfield. We should both get headbands and shades.
Yeah,
So we could be the cool Ryan Tannehills, otherwise known as Baker Mayfield.
maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe that's what we'll do. But guys, thank you so much for watching this live stream, tuning in. Greatly appreciated. Let us know your thoughts and opinions down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on that as well. Go subscribe to Billy. He is in the description of the live stream. Go check him out. I'd love to get your guys' thoughts and opinions on his content. Go subscribe to him as well. It'd be greatly appreciated. But guys, thanks so much for watching this live stream. Hope y'all enjoyed. As always, we'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now. See you soon, and go Bucs.